Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Align, where we help you align with your true self, others, and your desired outcome to live your best life. Today we have a very, I would say, topical topic, so to speak, where I think everyone's talking about it now, regulations coming through to be more supportive of the space. So we'll be discussing investing in cannabis. And who else to bring on than Vikas himself. So Vikas, we're so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Course. And I think a little bit of background how we met. So we actually went to NYU Stern together. Funny how everything kind of works out. We were connected, was it earlier this year? Well, we were connected like last year through COVID.
Yeah.
You did your banking track. I did my asset management track. And I felt like we kind of did our own little world. And then we come back together on the buy side, which is fun. And the last episode, which is with Chrissy, who's the founder of Legal Oil, she also went to school with us, and she's actually one of your portfolio companies. So
yeah, the world's coming together, intertwined.
Exactly. So I think first thing is I was super shocked. First of all, I didn't know anything about your background. I only knew you through school. So I didn't know that you had, your family, you had a family office, you worked for your family office, but then eventually you pivoted to VC. Obviously you're an Asian background, so am I. So would love to first hear how you got your dad to agree to let you create your own VC in cannabis, right? A little taboo in our culture.
Yeah. Funny thing is that it is taboo, but he was actually pretty supportive of it to the point where I think he was pushing me along.
Wow.
So it's pretty funny that's the case. Yeah. So I've been working with my family for a bit after I left my last gig at Oak Tree, and we do a lot of healthcare real estate development, and we own and operate health and wellness businesses. And obviously see a lot of crossover with cannabis. So about 4 years ago, I started getting approached about investing in the space. And that's when, my dad was like, hey, you should take a look at this. And so I spent about half a year diligencing the industry, just had a ton of conviction coming out of that. And then just saw an opportunity in the early stage part of the ecosystem where, in the back half of 17 and early 18, a lot of capital, but the limited capital that was going into cannabis was really going into Canadian public markets, pre-RTOs, as opposed to the fundamental foundational picks and shovels businesses, especially the early stage. And so, that sort of jump-started a whole effort to, provide capital in a capital startup space. So it's been an interesting journey since then.
Yeah, especially given your background in banking, came from Oak Tree, so still I would call I won't say safer bets per se, right? But obviously it's not a VC fund; it's more traditional, call it credit in the private space. What made you think, I actually want to go into venture? I actually want to be an early stage venture. It's kind of the two ends of the stick. So what motivated you to be more taking more risk?
Yeah, I think it was less of a desire to go into early stage venture. Not that I don't enjoy it; I actually enjoy it a lot. It was more of I'm super excited about cannabis. I think it's an incredible growth opportunity. It's one of the few sectors that I think has proven its resiliency, especially during COVID. But then there's a ton of tailwinds behind it, and just regulatory challenges that create dislocation. But it's something that people have been consuming and using for many years, if not hundreds. And so, from that perspective, it was really more about, determining that I wanted to be in the space and figuring out the best way to participate, leveraging the skill set that I brought, my prior experience, to where the opportunity was within the industry, and putting those two together. Those happened to be, an early stage venture firm. And so, that was a learning curve in itself, just to your point, given the background on the private equity side and the banking side, but really allowed me to sort of broaden my horizons and skill set, and really sort of meet the market where it needed to be met. So
it sounds like, going into early stage was a derivative of you want to be in cannabis and being best positioned for cannabis.
Yeah, look, I'm a big believer that sector momentum is extremely important. And when you think about making critical decisions, in life, I think, there's a lot to be said of being in the right place, right time, in sort of the right space. And so, think about the early tech days and the folks who got in early there, and kind of what's happening in cannabis, and in blockchain and esports, and so some of these other new sectors that are paving the way for the next 10 years. And so ultimately, I think it was just as important just to be in the space that I found exciting, that I found compelling, that I think is a massive opportunity, just as much as anything else. So
yeah. Let's talk about fundraising, right? I feel it's, especially through the summer, there's been quite, not that it created a noise, but there's been a lot in the press, going forward, going back. Where do we stand now, if you can kind of summarize, and where do you think we're gonna be by the end of the next year, couple of years?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So what's clear is that, when we started our platform in early 18, we are now 3 years closer to some sort of federal reform, which is a bit of a cheeky statement, but ultimately, legalization is going to take time, right? And that is, the be all end all. That's the real inflection point that I think everyone is working towards. From a regulatory perspective, it was clear with COVID that cannabis was deemed essential, and that that created a run in terms of people looking at the space in a very positive way. And then ultimately with Biden in November and the Democrats in the Senate in January, I think that just created this perception and dynamic that legalization was around the corner. Legalization takes time, right? You have sub 20 states that are rec legal, and you've got close to 40 states now that are medically legal. And so ultimately, you still need more critical mass on the adult use side before you actually can approach legalization. But ultimately, it's clear that we're moving in that direction. The question of how long is it going to take, right? And so what I think you've seen is a pullback from people's expectations, and that's evidence in the public markets of, hey, it may not happen as fast as we all think it will, but states like New York, New Jersey coming online, states like Georgia with the medical program, more conservative states are actually enacting some form of cannabis legislation. And so ultimately, I think we're just moving steps closer, and you're gonna see incremental steps, right? So we still haven't seen safe banking yet, which will provide some banking protections. And I think those steps need to happen before we get to full form legalization. And so, time will tell, but it's clear that as more states come online, that'll just continue to put more pressure. And I think, things like what Schumer did when he unveiled his bill was really just, it's more political than anything else. I don't think that really had, many legs from a legalization perspective.
Yeah. And obviously COVID was a big event to kind of turn the general consensus about cannabis. So let's apply COVID to a fundraising perspective, right? So your first fund, 2018, obviously pre-COVID. Your second fund now, you're in the market fundraising, right? You are a new gen, you are an impact, you are kind of like the new age investment. So I would assume things have been quite smoother for you relative to kind of old school finance, but we'll love to hear, given your experience in 2018, given your experience now, what has changed and how has it pivoted your, strategy for fundraising?
For sure. 2018 started cold, no real experience fundraising, kind of didn't know what I was getting myself into. And so it was hard. We were constrained from a capital perspective in this industry, which works to our benefit from a standpoint of getting deals done because it's a less competitive environment. Institutions can't play. We can really carve out a name for ourselves. That same benefit is also a challenge for us, right, as a platform, because we can't go raise from institutions. So we have to raise from family offices and high net worth individuals, which is more of a ground game at the end of the day when you think about scaling. And so, the way I think about it is, look, first fund is really predicated on folks in your network, and people who know you and trust you, and people who know and trust them, right? And so there's some mutual degree of connectivity there, because ultimately, you've got a vision and you've got what you want to execute on, and you're displaying that, but it's not tangible yet, right? And so things that we did during that process, we're trying to make it tangible, i.e., investing while we were fundraising, so we can actually develop a portfolio. But ultimately, it was hard, but once you started to get momentum, it started, it started moving in the right direction, and we had a successful first fund. And so, I think that's highly predicated on vision and your belief that you can execute. Fund two, you've got a track record, right? So we had we had a track record of outside of cannabis prior to, but now we've got, hey, we've got a portfolio of Fund 1 investments. We've got performance on those investments. We've got a pipeline of deals and deals that have actually been executed in Fund 2. And so it's been interesting to be able to say, hey, look, we came out there starting from scratch. We've developed a reputation and recognition. We've been able to generate deal flow. We've done good deals, right? It's the things that people are focused on when you start a platform. And then now it's very much focused on, how are the deals performing? Kind of what is your strategy going forward? And so I think it's been a lot, the story has been a lot easier this time around, given that dynamic.
Got it. Cool. And obviously you've pivoted from, you have your banking background, credit background, and you eventually decided to start your own VC fund. What have you learned about, creating fundraising on your own? You didn't do fundraising before, right? When you were at Oaktree? Or...
Yeah, no. So it's interesting. You come from big private equity and you are very siloed at the end of the day, right? If you're an investment professional, you focus on investing and that's all you really focus on, right? Like asset management is different division, and anything related with investor relations is a different division. And even within investing, it's you've got a specific role of what you play within a team. That is the polar opposite of what we have to do now, which is wear many hats, the IR hat, the operations hat, the investing hat, the asset management hat, which is fun. I find it way more dynamic, and I enjoy it. But ultimately, you take for granted, or you don't realize all the mechanics that go into actually starting the fund and what that means for a operational point of view, a legal point of view, a compliance, and middle and back office point of view. Luckily we've got great vendors and groups that we work with to make our lives a lot easier, so we can focus on investing and fundraising more fundraising. But it's a whole different world, right? It's a different world that I had no exposure to. So it's just like starting a business. It's no different, right? It just happens to be the asset management business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously your partner was extremely important. So the decision to, instead of going solo by yourself and actually bring on a partner, and you're also bringing on another partner as you kind of shop the market, what was the driver for you to say hey, I actually do want a team. I want Merrick on my team. How was that process for you?
Yeah, look, the question of whether you want to be, a solo fund manager, have a partner is, I think it's actually a very personal question. I think it's it can go both ways. During that process, I got a lot of advice from a lot of different people. And I think it really has to do more with your personality type than anything else. I think for me, it was important to be able to have someone to bounce ideas off of, have someone to think about ideas and think about execution, and kind of just someone to be there with you in the trenches. Because when you build something alone, having raised the first fund and invested in our first 9 deals by myself, it's it's hard, right? It's hard given all the things you have to do, but also you're making all the decisions ultimately by yourself, right? And so you're trying to find folks to bounce ideas off of and just gut check that, hey, direction moving in a positive way in the right direction. And so I think there's much more of a personality thing for me, of just that I think I operate better and I'm a better investor when when there's someone that I can work with. So.
Yeah. What about, let's talk a little bit about the companies or the innovation you see out there, right? Kind of give us a landscape. Obviously you invest in everything from plant touching to not plant touching, everything from actual consumer products all the way down to B2C companies. So, what are you excited about coming up? What's already available?
Yeah. So, look, cannabis is interesting because it's a sector that obviously rapidly growing, that's been living in the shadows. And so access to traditional infrastructure and business services and technology just wasn't there relative to a lot of other sectors. So they were, rapidly meeting or getting to the point where other traditional sectors, have been. So because of that, it's not an industry where you can say, hey, I'm just going to focus on SaaS and cannabis, right? Outside of saying I'm only going to invest in plant touching licensed operators, there's not enough depth yet in any one given vertical. It still requires you to actually invest across the industry. And so while we have a pretty diversified approach, we touch a lot of different verticals. It means we get smart on a lot of different types of businesses. It does mean that like you're still, we're not investing in moonshot ideas. And so ultimately, I think opportunity wise, like the first set of opportunities were really foundational, just like core fundamentals infrastructure, so point of sale software, for example, right? Like basic things that once again, other spaces have taken for granted. I still think that there is some core work to be done, but you're now sort of seeing that second level of infrastructure, whether it be stuff with unique IP or stuff that's being built upon that first layer. We just made an investment in a company called Birchmount, which is a gift card network that sits on top, right, of the point of sale businesses. And that's sort of an example of that second layer type of investment. So, look, I think technology, software, data are all still powerful verticals within cannabis. And then I think on the plant touching side, a lot of value is going to accrue to either consumer brands as it does in any other sector. The question is how long that takes. I think it requires legalization for it truly to accrue there. And then on the bookends of the supply chain, right? So brands sit on one side and then genetics and IP around there sit on the other side. And I think that's where a lot of value is going to accrue to when you think about where value has been generated in traditional ag. So yeah.
Got it. When I talk to investors, I think especially throwing you guys into the new gen or the impact space, so to speak, obviously this shiny new object or toy that comes in will kind of get the attention, right? So NFTs are coming up, crypto's, it's old news, but there's always a new kind of coin, new kind of thing going on, new pipes and whatnot. What do you say? What's your response to, the heydays of cannabis are over?
It's a great question. Look, I think the heydays of cannabis was the euphoria that happened in 2018. Ultimately, I think there's a ton of opportunity. I mean, you're talking about a sector that's sub $30 billion, and the alcohol industry is a $500 billion global sector. So like, there's tons of opportunity, right? Like, don't get me wrong. It's not the opportunity to make a quick buck, in 3 months, right? The way that you could have previously. And so I think, if anything, it's gotten more fundamentally sound and less risky. From that perspective, I think there's tons of opportunities to generate really strong returns. I think the fact that the U.S. public markets aren't even open for cannabis is like a whole opportunity set in itself. And I think you're going to see a massive amount of value being created when that happens. And so, look, I think the key is the opportunity shifts. And I think it just self-selects into different kinds of people in terms of what their criteria, is, or in terms of like, what is the risk reward that they're looking for when making an investment. And I think there's a much smaller subset of individuals or family offices or investors who are willing and looking to take that kind of outsized risk. And so we actually just think the opportunity is like on the horizon. Still the bottom of the first inning. And a lot of people are like, we're in the fourth inning, third inning, fifth inning. And I'm like, we're in the bottom of the first inning, right? We still got a long way to go before legalization. So there's a lot of ways to be successful in this space.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited for your journey, Vikas. Honestly, I think this was super helpful, and I'm sure the audience would agree, kind of dispelling some of the myths of the space. I always wrap up with a question for everybody. So would love to hear, I really believe that everyone has a gift.
Yeah.
And, we're here on earth to share this gift, to make humanity better and our community better. So what would you say your gift is?
That's a great question.
Don't be modest.
I think my gift is the ability to just bring energy into the interactions that I have, whether they're with friends, family, random people I've never met before, investors, portfolio companies. I really pride myself on that. I'm always going, which is good. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that is your energy. And I would say having got like on the BD side, having sat with so many PMs who have, they're all different styles. I think like you're very calm but confident energy is very unique. I think like, you know, obviously in the PM side, sometimes it's a little too salesy that I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I actually know the number. So I'm like, just don't speak. You know the truth.
Yeah.
Hold back, right?
Yeah.
We're able to just be completely frank, honest, right? But it's not dry, and it's also not like talking about going to the moon, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think your energy is something very unique with the calmness that you bring in, but it's still like a confidence, like a calm confidence, you know?
Yeah.
But awesome. Well, thank you, Vikas. Congratulations.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And I'm excited for all the new portfolio companies that are going to onboard into Achari.
Cool. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
You got it. Bye, Vikas.
See ya.